А, ну.
Маску, пусть оденет, и все.
Да?
Маску
И кто все равно то знает, да?
Russian commanders sent them into an assault to capture Ukrainian positions. Look. North Korean soldiers are running across the field without cover or any armored vehicles. It resembled a scene from World War I. Clearly, the Russian command has absolutely no regard for the Koreans. The Russians did not provide them with any armored vehicles. Perhaps this is because the Koreans are not trained to operate them, and the Russians have neither the time nor the desire to train them. Moreover, the Koreans have no experience in modern warfare. They don't know what drones are or how to act under such circumstances. The Russian army had time to at least partially adapt to this, whereas the Korean soldiers never even had internet access to learn about the current realities. Ukrainian units deployed a large number of drones against the Korean soldiers, as well as conducted targeted artillery fire and used cluster munitions. This quickly disorganized their attack, and in panic, they didn't know what to do. It was evident that they were poorly prepared and utterly confused. They started scattering in different directions, hiding in bushes and among trees. Some of them tried to regroup, but it didn't help them. Ukrainian drones quickly scattered them, and they fled like mice, while the Koreans were hiding and trying to avoid encounters with Ukrainian FPV drones. Reconnaissance drones clearly captured their faces on camera, confirming that they were indeed Koreans. Their eyes revealed that they were terrified. Some Koreans turned out to be more cunning and began digging trenches to hide, but the frozen ground allowed them to dig only shallow shelters. This, too, did not help them. Some of them tried to flee from the drones, while others even attempted to shoot them down. However, this did not lead to any significant success. The most elite soldiers managed to establish a position on the opposite side of the field, but the Ukrainians sent a tank against them. The Ukrainian T-80 tank quickly located their position and began delivering strike after strike until they were completely destroyed. Later, videos from a Russian hospital appeared online, showing injured Korean soldiers. This is further evidence that Russia is indeed using them in the war against Ukraine, although it officially denies it. And although the Russian forces are currently using Korean troops very sparingly, they continue to launch full-scale assaults on other parts of the front. To avoid falling into a trap, they split into several smaller groups. Two enemy APCs decided that the safest option would be to try breaking through this field, but they immediately came under heavy fire from Ukrainian artillery. The first shot hit one of the armored vehicles directly, completely destroying it. Its counterpart was slightly luckier. It managed to avoid the shelling, so it sped up, maneuvering around the shattered remains of its companion, hoping to reach a safe location. However, the Ukrainian army is equipped not only with artillery, but also with more precise means of destruction. This time, only one kamikaze drone was needed, which the operator skillfully guided into the most vulnerable spot of the armored vehicle, and the crew of this tank decided it would be safer to bypass the road, fearing it might be mined. However, the Ukrainian sappers proved to be even more cunning. Its companion managed to avoid the mines but couldn't escape a precise javelin strike. Most of the equipment in this assault was destroyed by one of the legendary Ukrainian drone operator units, Magyar birds, who have repeatedly demonstrated their courage and cunning, and we will show you exactly how. Over the years of practice, the pilots of this team have learned not only to fly skillfully, but also to hit the most vulnerable spots of enemy equipment with maximum precision. For example, in this case, the drone flew straight into the open hatch of a Russian APC and even continued transmitting video. At first, it seems that the mission has failed and the detonation didn't work. But after a few seconds, we see that everything went exactly as planned. Even when the Russians leave the hatch open, flying an FPV drone inside an APC or tank is extremely difficult. However, this method allows for the most effective destruction of Russian military equipment, but this is only possible if the vehicle is already immobilized. When the armored vehicle is moving and maneuvering, the drone pilot becomes a true hunter, stalking their prey. The Russian APC leaves the road and tries to maneuver to avoid the drone attack. The first strike damaged the vehicle but didn't stop it. The Russians continued their offensive, but at one point, it seemed that panic took over, and they immediately changed their course, hoping to escape the battlefield without even attempting to deploy their troops. They turned back onto the same road they had just come from and began fleeing quickly. But by this time, another FPV drone pilot had taken over, having closed the distance and was now in range for an attack. The second explosion caused even more damage, and we can see smoke starting to rise from inside the armored vehicle. Such damage was no longer something the Russian crew could ignore, and they made the only right decision: to evacuate and abandon the vehicle. They quickly scattered in different directions, realizing that where two drones had hit, there was a high likelihood that a third would soon follow. And they were right. The third kamikaze drone completely destroyed the APC, and we see the flames engulfing its body. But even after all the losses that occurred at the beginning of this assault, the Russians don't stop and continue sending additional reinforcements, one after another, to the same positions. Well, the Ukrainians definitely have more drones than the Russians have armored vehicles, and they are using this to their advantage. Another APC is lost forever, and once again, the team of Russian assault troops flees in panic back to where they came from. But did this stop the advance? Not at all. A Russian tank quickly moves to assist the destroyed APCs, but this time it was not a drone or artillery that stopped it, but a remote-controlled mine. A reconnaissance drone spots another unit of Russian equipment moving towards the recently destroyed tank. This time, it's a light vehicle with almost no protection, making it an even more vulnerable target. Do the Russians not value the lives of their soldiers, sending them to storm in regular cars? Following the car, the newest Russian armored vehicle, Akhmat, joins the assault. But is it really as durable as Russian propaganda claimed on their TV channels? Due to sanctions, many compromises had to be made in the production of this equipment, and the result can be seen in this video. Just one precise hit from a kamikaze drone, and although the vehicle continued to move for a while, we soon see the end of its journey. While the latest Russian equipment burns alongside its counterparts, Ukrainians continue to deploy drones to finish off what remains. The first armored vehicle had not yet finished burning when another one headed down the same road. It seems the Russians were ordered to continue the offensive at all costs. Cautiously bypassing the destroyed equipment, they moved toward the spot where a tank had recently been blown up by a mine. However, they didn't know that, in the meantime, Ukrainians had conducted another round of remote mining using the Baba Yaga drone. And as it turned out, this was a very good decision. Another armored vehicle has been successfully neutralized, and yet another group of Russians is frantically searching for cover from the deadly Ukrainian drones. But what do you think happened next? That's right, the Russians sent yet another armored vehicle to the exact same location, following the exact same route. And as soon as the crew got closer, they fell into the same trap as their comrades. Give a like to the ingenuity of the Ukrainian forces, who managed to lure so much enemy equipment into an ambush on such a small section of the front line. Because the Russians mindlessly attempted to attack this position head-on. In this short episode alone, they lost more than 24 pieces of various equipment and even more soldiers' lives. We cannot say for certain what their plan was, but it definitely did not include a graveyard of burning Russian equipment. The remnants of the column that didn't fall into this ambush weren't in for anything good either. This APC was stopped with the first hit. After the crew fled, Ukrainian pilots once again did what they do best, finished off the vehicle from the inside. Another enemy group left their tank in a forest near Ukrainian positions. Perhaps they hoped that the camouflage would help hide it, and the branches would prevent drones from getting closer. But as we can see, the FPV drone operator skillfully avoided all obstacles and delivered a powerful strike. Then, his colleague also decided to join in. That day, the Magyar Birds unit had to work at a very intense pace, but the results were impressive. Such a large amount of destroyed Russian equipment in such a short period of time is not something you see every day. And considering that destroying one tank or APC often requires using 2 or 3 drones, just imagine how many flights Ukrainian soldiers made that day. We've already mentioned that the Russians lack military equipment, and another piece of evidence of this is the following video. The Ukrainian kamikaze drone hit the armored personnel carrier at the moment when it was trying to evacuate from the battlefield its damaged tank. It didn't stop after the first explosion and continued towing its armored companion. Only after another hit did the crew start fleeing. Realizing that instead of saving another piece of equipment, they had now lost 2. Perhaps the shortage of equipment can explain this strange episode that was captured on video. The soldiers inexplicably decided to place the Russian flag on a destroyed Ukrainian armored vehicle, proudly displaying it as if they had captured a pile of scrap metal. One could assume they were simply celebrating its destruction, but why put the Russian flag on it? Perhaps we will never understand the logic behind some of their actions. A few days later, another Russian convoy tried to launch an offensive on Ukrainian positions. But this time they were met not by a swarm of drones, but by a very heavy artillery fire. In just a few accurate salvos, the Ukrainians managed to destroy 4 out of the 5 units of equipment involved in the attack. Then, another shell hit the last APC, which was desperately trying to escape its fate. And after that, drone pilots joined the defense as well, ultimately turning the formidable military equipment of the occupiers into heaps of scrap metal. And this time, we can also observe how the Russians do not care for or value their soldiers, sending them on futile assaults and attempting to seize another piece of territory by relying solely on the number of lives sacrificed in battle. Only the Russian soldiers themselves care about their lives, as in this case. When realizing the drone's approach, they decided to abandon the vehicle on the move to avoid becoming victims of the kamikaze strike.
This Ukrainian T-64 faced off against what appears to be a Russian T-72 tank in a one-on-one tank-on-tank duel. The Ukrainian T-64 confidently charged toward the Russian tank while firing its main cannon from a relatively close distance for tank-on-tank engagements. What you just saw here right now could have been a ricochet. Even though the Ukrainian fire did not seem to have any effect and could not penetrate the Russian T-72, the Russians still decided to turn the tank around and abandon the firing position. This did not stop the Ukrainian tank from continuing the attack while on the move and keeping the Russian tank under fire. The T-72, which had deployed smoke in the meantime, was finally hit directly in the back but continued moving. This round clearly went to the Ukrainian T-64. This Ukrainian helicopter intercepted a Russian Shahid drone mid-flight with its onboard machine gun at very close range, preventing the Russian drone from hitting critical Ukrainian infrastructure. We can clearly see the Russian drone slowly descending to the ground, where it crashes into a snow-covered field and explodes. This is a relatively rare sight showing a Polish-made KTO Rosomek IFV firing its 30mm and K-44 Bushmaster 2 chain gun at a Russian-occupied tree line. It might be using airburst ammunition, as suggested by the nature of the impacts, though it is unclear whether these are programmable airburst rounds. The suppressive effect of these impacts looks remarkable. By the way, this appears to be the only video so far that shows the Rosomek in action like this, which is why I referred to it as a rare sight. The KTO Rosomek is a Polish-made infantry fighting vehicle derived from the Finnish Patria AMV. I think the Poles deserve a like for this beast of an IFV. What do you think? The video shown here is archival footage from 2014, depicting a motorized group of pro-Russian separatists being heavily hit by Ukrainian tank fire in an open field. I think the video highlights the stark contrast in the evolution of the Ukraine war from then to today. The video is subtitled so that viewers can understand what is being said and has otherwise been kept as raw as possible for the old war leaks feel.
Потихоньку, потихоньку, вперед! Двигайся, говорю тебе! А эти что завели? Они нахуй стреляют!
Я вообще должен информационность, пацаны, пару километров. Что там вообще не там? Слышите, откуда? Так, сюда далеко.
Так, вот так прямо на эту пульте держи.
Стрель, подтягивай своих! Стрель! Стрель, подтягивай! Стрель, подтягивай своих! Ребят, мы так ушли далеко в глубь, это пиздец. Мы вышли вообще из строя. Подожди, надо дождаться, выровняться. Тут его на... Сейчас нас дожмут тут с двух сторон. Стой, давай концом по линии надо равно. Пошли его. Влево, блядь, влево иди! Вы что, одного человека взять не можете, на? Давай, вали, страй, пошли. Просто за операцию, блин. Что попали, долбоёб, пацаны, давайте, берите, кто-нибудь, блядь. Травмадол давай, сука! Чё, блядь, всех обучали же? Бегом! Стой! Давай, травмадол. Не брось, не боись. Газель, давай, вызывай газель, блядь, туда, зелёнка. Там никто не остался, не знаешь, машина.
The Ukrainian blog War Translated converted some commentary by the soldiers from this battle to English. So first have a look at the full video.
Помалу, позиція за позицією, противник відтискав нас до самої шахти. Тобто паралельно з нами працювало, що також бійці отримували поранення.
Посадки, які тримали наші бійці, так само ж з злагодженістю 72-га бригада з НГУ. Вони зрозуміли, що ми там працюємо з 3-го поверху, і там працює кулеметник, там працює РПГ, там і ВОГ, і РПК, і все. То 2 дні безмежного було обстрілу танками, які бомбили по 3 години. Я головний сержант взводу, в мене є. Вони можуть лізти цілий день. Цілий день. Тобто намагатись 2 людини загнати там в адмінбудівлю, 2 людини десь загнати, там, як ми називали, там, магазин. Ну, сумарно закидувати дима.
Можете на зв'язок.
Хортиця, морпіх на прийомі.
657 готовий прийом.
Прийняв. Я чекаю, бо я чую, хтось ломить на першому поверсі. Так, ти бачиш, що в дверях? Так, ну ж, готуйся.
Природжений РПшник, де? А? Ще одно?
Морпех, я ходите, 590 чудовий.
Вона перед нами прямо що стоїть до... Я спека ще її роз... Вони вийшли, дивися, що перед нами. Ось що прям за трансформат. Давайте роздаш. Вони у нас у дворі.
Акробат, готовий, воно лізе до Христа. Акробат, воно зійшла по фото. Розпочали по ній. Акробат, як прийняли.
Давай. Чекай. Морквину чи карандаш? Морквина чи карандаш?
As mentioned, this took place in the Pivden Nordom-Baska coal mine near Vuhledar, which offers a wide view of the surrounding terrain. The two Russian soldiers charged from this direction toward the Ukrainian soldiers positioned in this building here. Preston Stewart mentioned in one of his videos that we don't often see soldiers holding the high ground in this war. This is because, especially in close combat, the risk of being cut off or taken out by precision strikes or other weapon systems is high. However, under certain circumstances, using elevated positions can make perfect sense, and we've seen it multiple times already, particularly in mid and long-range combat when combined with guided anti-tank weapons. Some of you might remember the video of the rooftop Ukrainians I shared at the beginning of the war.
Есть.
Огонь, огонь! Заряжай! Заряжай второй, матерый!
Here, this was also the case, as seen in this segment showing the soldiers using guided anti-tank weapons against Russian armored vehicles approaching their positions. As we all know by now, drip-fed mechanized assaults, especially those consisting of only a few armored vehicles, have been the backbone of nearly every offensive operation in this war for some time. Paired with the relatively flat terrain in Ukraine, this makes massive industrial concrete buildings, as well as high-rise apartment blocks, ideal locations for organizing defensive operations. Massive concrete constructions are particularly advantageous in this context because of their durability. Even under heavy bombardment, they can withstand damage better than makeshift or temporary fortifications, enabling defenders to remain in position longer and coordinate their actions more effectively. High-rise buildings, in particular, allow defenders to dominate the surrounding area, giving them the ability to engage enemy forces at extended ranges while maintaining relatively secure firing positions. This, however, requires robust security measures, as units holding the high ground are at significant risk of being isolated if the enemy manages to close in for direct combat. Without adequate support elements to provide relief, such troops can quickly become encircled or cut off, which can lead to disastrous outcomes. To mitigate these risks, well-coordinated support is essential. This includes establishing overlapping fields of fire, maintaining reserve units ready to counter any breaches, and ensuring communication lines remain intact for requesting artillery, air, or mechanized support when needed. Additionally, integrating reconnaissance and surveillance capabilities, such as drones or forward observers, can help identify and neutralize threats before they reach the defenders' positions. Fights for high ground and massive, heavy buildings are a significant aspect of this war. These locations provide strategic advantages, and battles to control them often become intense and prolonged. Currently, Torets, with its numerous apartment blocks, is a prime example of this kind of combat, as fighting occurs both over and from building to building, creating a brutal urban battlefield. Apartment blocks, with their dense construction and multi-story layouts, offer defenders substantial advantages. They provide elevated firing positions, good visibility for spotting enemy movements, and solid cover against small arms and light artillery. The interconnected nature of these buildings also allows defenders to establish layered defenses, retreating to adjacent structures if one is compromised. Furthermore, once positions are taken, it becomes extremely difficult, time-consuming, and bloody for infantry to clear buildings again. This is one of the key reasons why urban battles are notoriously prolonged and grueling. In the specific case of Torets, recently, the 47th Mechanized Brigade released a short but intense video showing Ukrainian Bradleys breaking through Russian defensive lines into Russia's Kursk region. The video shows them exploiting a breach in the defensive line consisting of Dragon's Teeth anti-tank obstacles. The video alternates between drone footage and ground-level shots captured by a camera strapped to one of the Bradleys, showing the vehicles engaging Russian positions in a tree line and deploying smoke to conceal their movements. The Ukrainian Telegram channel War Archive uploaded a full video of this operation, which I didn't want to keep from you. So here's the over 10-minute long Bradley combat video with sound and without commentary by me in the spirit of the old war leagues. can see in this reference clip from a Russian live fire demonstration, the effect is quite similar. In this helmet cam video, a Russian soldier armed with a Weapon 12 multipurpose semi-automatic shotgun captures the moment a Ukrainian MRAP is hit by a Russian RPG during an assault on their positions, reportedly in the Kursk region. Slowed down footage from the original source shows the hit from an even closer perspective, but it appears the MRAP handled it quite well, even though a damage assessment is missing, leaving us to speculate about the final effect of the impact. This is an interesting piece of helmet cam footage showing a Ukrainian Special Forces unit from the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine during an urban combat operation in Kroglyakivka in the Kupiansk region. I'll explain why this footage is particularly noteworthy in a moment. After the men infiltrated the settlement in pickup trucks, they began engaging suspected Russian positions with small arms fire at close range to clear the area. To put it simply, many of their shots were fired preventively to suppress potential Russian soldiers and force them into passivity. The particularly interesting detail that grabbed my attention was the use of a shotgun by one of the operators, marking the first time I've seen such a weapon used in combat against a ground target rather than a drone during a war. That is, if we set aside the previous clip. However, in this instance, the soldier was actively firing the shotgun. In this video, a lone Russian soldier directly approached a group of Ukrainian soldiers in a destroyed building in Torets, believing that the Ukrainians were fellow Russian soldiers. However, the Ukrainians immediately opened fire. In this short but somewhat chaotic situation, the soldier wearing the camera also flagged his buddy, who crossed through his field of view to change positions. Such scenarios highlight how the fog of war can increase the likelihood of errors and unplanned engagements in close quarters combat, where split-second decisions are made in high-stress, confusing environments. This uncertainty creates an atmosphere where even well-trained soldiers can flag teammates, misidentify threats, or engage in friendly fire, further complicating battlefield dynamics. This drone video, released by the 47th Mechanized Brigade, shows a Ukrainian Bradley and an American-made M1 Abrams operating on Russian soil for the first time in history as they engage a Russian position in the Kursk region. First, the Bradley moved in and hammered the Russian hideout with its 25mm automatic Bushmaster cannon. This was followed by the Abrams, which began shelling the area with its powerful main gun. At least 6 rounds were fired at the overwhelmed Russians as their position was heavily hit by shots fired from very close range. Cell phone footage captured the moment a Russian Shahid drone was hunted down by a Ukrainian Mi-24 Hind helicopter, which shot the drone down with its 12.7mm gun. To give a sense of the actual size of a Russian Shahid drone, here is one leaned against a Ukrainian home. This Russian tank, equipped with a mine roller, took a direct hit from a Ukrainian-fired Javelin missile. The tank kept moving for a while, however, 2 of the crew members began to bail out of the still-moving vehicle. Shortly afterward, the tank hit what appeared to be 2 mines, and the video ended. Here is another drone video showing a Javelin missile striking a Russian armored vehicle. It's pretty interesting that they still use Javelins, given all the access to anti-armored drones they have nowadays. The Russian pickup truck you see here was on its way to deliver Russian infantry to the Grey Zone. During its mission, a Ukrainian drone spotted and closely tracked the vehicle's movement to direct artillery fire onto it. When the Russian truck noticed the first round of sporadic artillery fire aimed at it, the driver began to speed up to escape the impact area. This just to hit a mine placed by Ukrainian engineers. A rather interesting video was released from the Kursk region, showing a Russian BTR with infantry riding on top as it drives toward a Ukrainian tank unit consisting of 2 tanks. The Ukrainian tanks in question are not Russian tanks captured by Ukrainian forces, as some misinformation spreading content farms sensationally claim, but rather Ukrainian T-64 tanks. It appears, however, that the BTR mistakenly identified the tanks as friendly as it calmly maneuvered in front of the tank's barrels, which then opened fire. After the first shell brought the BTR to a standstill, the second tank finished off the now immobilized vehicle with another shot. Contrary to what the previously mentioned content farms claimed, this was not the end of the story. The Russians managed to destroy one of the Ukrainian tanks shortly afterward, as shown in footage documenting the destroyed BTR and one of the Ukrainian tanks. This drone video also shows an interesting armor-on-armor engagement from the Kursk region, but this time from the other perspective, capturing a Russian L-shaped ambush conducted by 2 BTRs on an advancing Ukrainian MRAP column. We see a column of at least 10 Ukrainian armored vehicles driving directly into a kill zone set up by the 2 Russian BTRs. Russian sources claimed that the convoy consisted of a total of 19 vehicles, and while it's possible that more than 10 vehicles drove into the ambush, the low quality of the footage makes an accurate count difficult. One after another, the Ukrainian vehicles drove into the field of fire of the first BTR, which engaged the unresponsive Ukrainians with its automatic cannon at close range. In such a situation, they advised responses to immediately return fire while simultaneously reporting the contact by providing what is known as the 3Ds: distance, direction, and description. Distance refers to the approximate range to the enemy, direction specifies the bearing or location of the threat, and description includes details about the enemy forces, such as type and number of vehicles or personnel. It appears that the Ukrainians did not follow this procedure, as they simply kept pushing through the kill zone without returning or suppressing fire, which could have been very effective given that BTRs are typically vulnerable to caliber 50 guns. Those that managed to push through the fire of the first BTR maneuvered directly into the line of fire of a second BTR positioned slightly further away from the first. It's unclear why they were unable to determine the BTR's positions, given their close proximity and the likelihood that the Ukrainians had communication links between vehicles due to the convoy's size. That said, it's easy for us to analyze from a distance and say they should have acted this way or that. In the end, most manuals on how to react to an ambush while mounted, whether close or distant, were written with scenarios involving IEDs followed by small arms fire, or at most, RPGs in mind. They do not typically address situations involving 30mm cannons fired at lightly armored vehicles from very close range in a high-intensity engagement, turning any dismounting and assault through the ambush to destroy the enemy into a guaranteed suicide mission. I think the outcome was more due to poor ISR beforehand and the general challenges of attempting fast-paced maneuver warfare, where time frames become increasingly compressed due to the omnipresence of drones. The only option would have been to bypass the ambush, which was not possible due to poor ISR in this case, or for the vehicles that hadn't yet entered the kill zone to consolidate, set up security and establish a base of fire to support the elements already in the kill zone. However, this was also not feasible, as the final Russian assault element closing the ambush would most likely have been replaced by FPV drones just waiting to interfere with this. This footage from the 225th Assault Battalion shows a pair of German-supplied Marder 1A3 infantry fighting vehicles maneuvering through heavy Russian fire consisting of RPGs and FPV drones. The video was filmed by a camera strapped on top of one of the Marders during an assault on a Russian-held forest strip in Kherson. The vehicle had several close calls with RPGs and FPVs but was not hit once. Given that the Marder 1A3 needs to fire from a standstill for optimal accuracy as its cannon is not stabilized, this is remarkable. While the RPG misses can largely be attributed to luck, the FPV drones were likely thwarted by electronic warfare systems in place that protected the IFVs from incoming Russian drones. So far, actual footage of the Marder in action has been extremely rare, as we've only really seen them in combat during the battle in Kursk. Previously, most footage showed either training exercises or abandoned Marders being destroyed by Russian drones. I think this clip is especially interesting for my fellow German viewers, as it is the first time ground combat footage of German-made Marder IFVs in action has been released, and this is exactly the scenario they were designed for. This Russian soldier was leaning against a disabled BTR with a missing wheel. In the nearby vicinity, more Russian soldiers were resting when they suddenly got interrupted by an incoming Ukrainian drone, and as if the drone wasn't enough, the Ukrainian Leopard tank suddenly appeared on the horizon and targeted the disabled Russian armored personnel carrier with its main cannon. This Ukrainian Leopard 2A4 tank also had the opportunity for some armor target practice under real combat conditions, as it was dispatched to disrupt an advancing Russian armored column, targeting it from a distance with its Rheinmetall manufactured 120mm smoothbore cannon. The Leopard executed a shoot and scoot maneuver, scoring direct hits on several Russian vehicles with what appeared to be high explosive shells. This is the last Leopard 2 video for today, as I promised there is plenty of other footage to share in this update. However, as you can see, this attempt was disrupted by an incoming Ukrainian FPV drone targeting the MRAP. This forced the Russian soldiers to disperse and take cover in nearby bushes as the Ukrainian kamikaze drone dove in and struck the Russian vehicle. Notice how the fire following the explosion was severe enough to spread over to the BTR. Russia appears to have scored another hit on a Ukrainian Patriot defense battery, as shown in drone footage released by the Russian Ministry of Defense. The video, filmed from a distance by a Russian observation drone, shows a total of 2 hits on the Patriot side immediately after what appeared to be missile launches from 2 of the Patriot launchers in self-defense. Russia stated that 2 US-made Patriot launcher stations, as well as a control station and radar unit that are part of the Patriot system, were struck in the 2 attacks. However, a clear damage assessment is missing, so only the Ukrainians and Russians truly know the outcome of this missile strike. A Ukrainian military blogger reported that the strike took place in Pavlorad in the central Dnipropetrovsk region, but stated that the damage was not critical. Kyiv relies on Western air defense systems, particularly the Patriot, to protect itself from the barrage of Russian missiles and has been calling for additional deliveries. Well, I'd better leave this one uncommented. I mean, what can I say to this? Crazy times we live in. His French-supplied Ukrainian Caesar howitzer of the 55th Artillery Brigade scored a series of accurate hits on Russian armor somewhere along the front line. While these hits are pretty impressive, they are nothing compared to the next clip. Here, an M777 howitzer from the 148th Artillery Brigade scored a direct hit on a moving Russian tank. Possible that this was a guided Excalibur shell. The tank kept rolling for a short distance, but eventually crashed and came to a standstill. In this clip, a Ukrainian drone drop targeted a Russian UGV from above. The drone successfully hit the unmanned ground vehicle, causing it to catch fire shortly afterward. Despite being engulfed in flames, the UGV continued to move. After coming to a halt for a short time, the UGV began moving once again. It's quite interesting that it was still partially operational even while on fire, but I suppose that's one of the advantages that comes with machines. Here, a Ukrainian tank advances toward a stationary Russian BMP and destroys it at very close range with its main cannon, all filmed from the screen of the observation drone operator. In a noteworthy friendly fire incident, a Russian fighter jet shot down a rare Russian S-70 Okhotnik stealth drone over Ukraine. At first, it was thought that the Russian jet had shot down another Russian fighter plane in a friendly fire incident, but footage of the drone falling to the ground later revealed that it was an S-70. While this was definitely a friendly fire incident, it is likely that the Russian plane shot the drone down intentionally, as the missile was launched from very close range, meaning the pilot most likely had visual confirmation of the target. He was most likely ordered to shoot it down because the Russians lost connection with it, and the decision was made to prevent it from ending up in enemy hands. This video reportedly shows the first documented use of Rheinmetall's 35mm Skynex air defense system in action, targeting Russian UAVs over Ukraine's capital. The Skynex system's advanced hit efficiency and destruction technology uses specialized ammunition that bursts into a cloud of tungsten sub-projectiles mid-flight, increasing the likelihood of hitting and disabling small, fast-moving targets like kamikaze drones.
Группа, третья группа, 2 человека к нам на эвакуацию, 2 человека к нам. 300.
This Russian helmet cam video shows a squad of Russian soldiers caught in an open field during an intense firefight. The soldiers are engaging Ukrainian positions while also being targeted by Ukrainian fire and drones hovering above them. Out in the open without cover, they try to hold their ground. According to some Russian sources, the reason they were out there was to act as a distraction to cover the assault of another Russian unit. However, this is unconfirmed, even though it would explain why they were exposed in the open. In theory, this allows the primary assault group to exploit gaps in the enemy's defenses by taking advantage of the diverted focus. However, without confirmation, it's unclear if this was indeed the intended purpose behind their deployment. Without natural or artificial cover, troops are fully exposed to direct fire from small arms, machine guns, snipers, and even indirect fire like mortars or artillery. In an open area, there is no immediate protection from incoming rounds, which forces soldiers to rely on quick movements or lying prone to minimize exposure, though these actions offer only limited protection. In modern combat, exposure to aerial surveillance, particularly from drones, further increases the danger. Drones can easily detect troops in open terrain and relay precise coordinates back to artillery or mortar teams, adding significant risk. Being in an exposed position restricts soldiers' ability to maneuver effectively. Options like advancing or moving laterally often mean exposing themselves further, increasing the chance of being hit. Repositioning or retreating across open ground is equally challenging, as movement makes them more visible and vulnerable to enemy fire. The psychological strain of facing such exposure with no barriers between them and the enemy can lead to intense anxiety and fatigue, impairing reaction times and decision-making and affecting both individual soldiers and the squad's overall effectiveness. Open terrain severely limits tactical options. Soldiers might try to engage the enemy while lying prone, but with minimal protection, their chances of sustaining casualties remain high. That's why it's no wonder that this soldier ended up within the blast radius of a drone-dropped explosive. However, he was lucky and escaped with just a fright. This kind of deployment is high risk and often sacrificial, as distraction units have few ways to defend or withdraw. In situations where open exposure is unavoidable, troops can employ certain tactics to reduce the risk. Deploying smoke screens, for example, can obscure vision, providing temporary cover. Suppressive fire may help keep enemy heads down, though it requires adequate ammunition and a clear line of sight. Quick sprints between any available low cover or terrain depressions can also reduce time spent exposed. though the effectiveness of this approach depends heavily on the landscape. In sum, being caught in open terrain during a firefight is an extremely hazardous scenario, and soldiers facing this rely on quick thinking, coordination, and any available tactical support to minimize exposure and increase their chances of survival. If you've watched this far, I want to thank you once again. Please make sure to share this video, leave a comment, and like it to support me and my content. This helps the videos reach a wider audience. I am also currently looking for scriptwriters and video editors to help me create better content. If you're a writer with experience in military and war themed topics, or a video editor skilled in video editing, motion graphics, and map animations, please check the description for more information. Thank you. In Kursk, Russian drone operators have increasingly turned to fiber optic cables to control FPV drones, particularly where electronic warfare interference is intense. This method gives operators a reliable alternative to radio frequencies, which are often jammed or intercepted by Ukrainian forces. The main advantage of fiber optics lies in its resistance to electronic warfare. Unlike radio-controlled drones, which can be jammed or tracked, fiber optic-controlled drones are immune to radio-based interference. This makes them a valuable tool in areas where signal disruption is common, as fiber optic cables transmit data via light, making jamming impossible. The cables also support stable, high-bandwidth communication, crucial for transmitting real-time video feeds for surveillance and targeting. With this steady connection, operators can maintain high-quality visuals and better respond to developments on the ground. This brave, lone Ukrainian M113 armored personnel carrier was on its way to carry out a very dangerous but vital mission in the area around Chasiv Yar. Tasked with delivering critical supplies to Ukrainian forces stationed in a large, multi-story apartment building, the M113 had to navigate exposed terrain under the constant threat of enemy fire. In conflict zones like Chasiv Yar, these resupply missions are essential for maintaining frontline defenses and supporting troops in fortified positions. The danger of this mission is highlighted by this Russian-released FPV drone video showing a different Ukrainian M113 variant being struck by a small first-person drone equipped with an RPG warhead. The M113 is only lightly armored, making even heavy-caliber machine guns a threat to it. This abandoned and burning Russian tank, equipped with a mine roller at the front, was used by Ukrainian drone pilots for target practice, dropping grenades through the hole in its added roof protection. The same tactic was also applied to a disabled MTLB. This helmet cam footage shows two Ukrainian Special Forces operators from the Ukrainian 8th Separate Special Operations Regiment in very close combat with at least one Russian soldier in one of the many ghost towns along Ukraine's front line. The two special operators, armed with saw machine guns, were about to enter an abandoned house, most likely to set up a firing position inside. However, the building was already being used as a hideout by at least one Russian soldier, who immediately opened fire on the lead operator just as he was about to enter. Luckily for the Ukrainians, the Russian missed his shots, allowing them to jump back into the open. From there, the soldier wearing the camera began firing his machine gun at a cyclic rate to suppress the Russian inside, enabling the two Ukrainians to break contact and fall back slightly to deal with the Russian in a different way. To get the situation under control, they used a shoulder-mounted rocket launcher to fire at a relatively small house. This Russian helmet cam video shows a pair of Russian soldiers on an ATV in a forest near Kupiansk. The soldiers hit what was reported to be a mine and had to continue their journey on foot through the desolate landscape that was once a forest. However, the mine was not the only danger lurking there, and soon the two men were targeted by a Ukrainian FPV drone. They attempted to respond by hiding behind a destroyed, abandoned vehicle wreck while using small arms fire to intercept the drone. Unfazed by their fire, the drone made several passes, trying to get the right angle to crash into the soldiers, who were still calmly attempting to shoot it down. Unfortunately for them, all their attempts failed, and the drone began its final dive to finish them off after trying some more times. Such videos from Ukraine often remind me of the Netflix show Black Mirror, particularly the footage captured in the Grey Zone, or so-called No Man's Land, between Russian and Ukrainian-controlled territory. It always brings to mind the episode called Metalhead. Leave a like and write it in the comments if you know what I mean. Fortunately, however, the drone missed by just inches, leaving both Russians unharmed. This nerve-wracking back and forth clearly illustrates the intensity of such an attack, which is difficult to counter, even if soldiers are sometimes successful in shooting down the FPVs. In this case, another Russian buddy team riding on an ATV was chased by a Ukrainian FPV drone. They responded by dismounting and opening fire on it. causing the drone to crash to the ground and explode just a few meters in front of them, fortunately outside their blast radius. While these occurrences are no longer rare and we frequently see such interception videos, there are still many unsuccessful attempts. This is true even though, statistically, 70% of FPV drone attacks fail due to jamming or other external factors. The North Korean element, consisting of at least an entire platoon and possibly more, was attempting to cross a wide, open, snow-covered field to move from one wooded area to another in a tight column, unaware that their movements were already being observed by multiple Ukrainian drones. With their low situational awareness and the extremely unfavorable terrain and weather conditions, they became an easy target for Ukrainian FPV drones, which began striking the exposed and inexperienced North Koreans without warning. Drone after drone descended from above onto the North Korean soldiers, who had no chance to take cover due to the terrain, leaving them unable to escape the Ukrainian kamikaze drones. But FPV drones were not the only thing the Ukrainians had in store for the North Koreans. Due to their inexperience and the way they attempted to cross the area in a tight formation, they practically invited the Ukrainians to use cluster munitions. No wonder, because the open area without cover paired with the tight spacing of the North Koreans created ideal conditions for the use of this type of ammunition here. In panic, they scattered across the area and tried to hide from the Ukrainian drones hovering above them. The ones who were lucky enough to avoid being hit by cluster munitions or FPV drones gathered nearby at the edge of a wooded area. However, it seems that most of the remaining North Koreans did not attempt to use the relative depth of the wooded area to gain at least some cover and concealment from the Ukrainian drones, choosing instead to remain at the edge of a tree line. There, they bunched up again, acting passively and unsure of how to handle the situation they had gotten themselves into. For the Ukrainians, this was yet another invitation to conduct a precision strike on the bunched up North Koreans. The few North Korean soldiers who had the idea to try hiding in the woods were targeted by drone drops and additional FPVs. Higher quality pictures of the hiding fighters clearly show that the soldiers are of Asian origin. While we should be careful not to label any slightly Asian-looking soldier in a Russian uniform as North Korean, there are several indicators suggesting that these could indeed have been North Korean soldiers.
Еще по Курской области корейцы. Все говорят о корейцах, соответственно, Курской области. Что сказать? Они там есть. Автоканалы, то есть я видел их там своими глазами.
Their inexperienced behavior and their complete, and I mean complete, lack of awareness regarding the drone threat also support this conclusion. On this matter, a Ukrainian military official told the Washington Post the following: "The North Koreans are running across the fields. There are so many of them. They don't understand what is happening. Whether the Russian army is deliberately sending these soldiers into the line of fire is hard for him to assess. In any case, the number of these seemingly disoriented soldiers has increased in recent days. Drone operators have never had such an easy time targeting them as they do now." According to Ukrainian sources, the recent North Korean assaults were part of a newly launched massive Russian counteroffensive in the Kursk region, where the Ukrainian army has been holding out since an unexpected advance earlier in the summer. On Monday, December 16th, the Ukrainian Secret Service reported that over the weekend, at least 30 North Korean soldiers fighting alongside Russian forces in the Kursk region had been killed or wounded in combat. The first limited clashes between North Korean and Ukrainian troops in Kursk Oblast, however, were reported already in early November. Back then, without video footage, intelligence agencies in Ukraine, the United States and South Korea have all said Pyongyang has deployed around 10,000 troops to Russia to fight alongside its army. According to a senior US military official, North Korean forces fighting alongside Russian troops in the Kursk region have already suffered several hundred casualties. North Koreans are reportedly in Ukraine because of the growing military alliance between Russia and North Korea. This cooperation is believed to have been facilitated by mutual needs. Russia, facing manpower shortages and international sanctions due to its war in Ukraine, is seeking external support, while North Korea, isolated and under heavy sanctions itself, sees an opportunity to strengthen its ties with Moscow in exchange for aid, technology, and other benefits. By aiding Russia, North Korea may gain diplomatic leverage and access to resources, technology, and potentially food or economic assistance. Deploying soldiers to Ukraine could give North Korean forces practical combat experience, which is valuable for their military development, even if this particular case shows that they still have a long way ahead of them. Even though this failed attack is painful to watch, there is a method and a certain logic behind it. Currently, Ukrainian units are severely understrength across all parts of the front due to a shortage of active combat troops. This leaves trenches and fighting positions relatively weakly manned. Through attacks like the one shown in this video, the Russians aim to wear down and soften these defensive positions in preparation for future offensives. The North Koreans, in this context, serve as the perfect tool for such operations. Lacking experience and likely seen as expendable by their Russian counterparts, they are deployed in frontal assaults to absorb Ukrainian firepower, deplete ammunition, and expose weak points in the lines. While the tactic results in heavy casualties for the North Koreans, it aligns with Russia's broader strategy of attrition, which seeks to grind down Ukrainian forces over time, regardless of the human cost to its own or allied troops.
Four drone. Good guy. Good guy.
Despite all this, some analysts have warned against underestimating the North Koreans. According to a veteran of the South Korean army, some of the troops sent to assist Russia are highly trained and indoctrinated soldiers known as the Storm Corps. He described them as better trained, with better physiques and better motivated than your average North Korean soldier. South Korean lawmakers say Russia is teaching the soldiers about 100 basic military terms like fire and in position as reports of command and communication issues arise. In Russia, their training has included artillery, operating unmanned aerial vehicles and basic infantry operations including trench clearing, which are critical skills for frontline operations, according to the US State Department. Moscow's success in utilizing the troops will in large part be dictated by how well the Russians can integrate them into their military. So far, when it comes to combat, the North Koreans appear to have been used exclusively in infantry roles, and this without any mechanized or motorized support. This lack of support is particularly deadly given the terrain and the nature of modern warfare in Ukraine, where mobility, armored protection, and coordinated firepower are crucial for survival on the battlefield. Deployed as foot soldiers, these North Korean units face significant disadvantages against Ukraine's highly effective drone strikes, precision artillery, and well-coordinated infantry tactics. Without mechanized vehicles to provide mobility and protection, or motorized support to quickly redeploy under fire, these troops are left dangerously exposed, especially in open terrain or during frontal assaults. According to the New York Times, Vladimir Putin reportedly paid Kim Jong-un up to $6 billion in exchange for weapons and the deployment of North Korean soldiers to support Russia's war effort in Ukraine. This marks a significant development in the deepening military cooperation between the two heavily sanctioned nations, driven by mutual strategic needs. The Hancock Institute in Seoul estimates that Pyongyang's arms shipments to Russia are valued between $1.72 billion and $5.5 billion. These payments were reportedly made partially in cash and supplemented with oil, food, and other forms of aid, which are critical for North Korea's struggling economy. The arrangement not only provides financial lifelines to Kim Jong-un's regime, but also strengthens its geopolitical alignment with Moscow. In addition to weapon sales, North Korea is believed to have deployed between 5,000 and 20,000 troops to Russia, earning an estimated $143 million to $572 million for their participation. Two FPV drones reportedly collided with each other in the Kursk region. It is hard to know who is who here, but given the outcome, it hardly matters since both were lost after the encounter. A lone Russian BMP-2, carrying infantry on top, charges across open terrain in the Kursk region. It is en route to assault a Ukrainian position in a tree line. The vehicle halts in front of the tree line and the infantry disembarks. They continue their advance on foot through the open while firing towards the Ukrainian positions. What the Russians don't realize is that a Ukrainian Javelin anti-tank team has already locked onto the BMP, which is now preparing to head back to its own lines to pick up more infantry. The Ukrainians launched the $80,000 missile at the moving target, striking it just a few meters from the spot where they dropped off the soldiers. This video from end of October 2024 shows a Russian Alligator helicopter shooting down a Ukrainian drone using an Igla anti-air missile. The video later showed the reported Ukrainian PD-2 drone crashing to the ground. This helmet cam footage captures a Ukrainian soldier armed with an M249 light machine gun, equipped with a Neo-Tech sight, ambushing Russian soldiers as they exited an apartment building in the city of Torets. A Ukrainian soldier from the Lyat Special Police Brigade opened fire from relatively close range on the unsuspecting Russians, who had no opportunity to return fire. This Ukrainian Leopard 2A4 tank showed that it is very capable of fulfilling its purpose even on the modern-day battlefield by ambushing a large Russian armored column in the Kurikov sector. The exact sequence of the battle leaves much room for debate due to the many rapid cuts in the footage, making it difficult to determine what happened and in what order. However, one thing can be said with certainty. This battle vividly illustrates the clash between the key strength of the Leopard 2 and one of the major weaknesses of the T-72 plus what happens when they meet in combat. After taking several hits from the Leopard, the crew of the lead T-72 attempted to turn the vehicle to escape the kill zone, which exposed their vulnerable side armor to the Leopard. As a result, the tank was hit and penetrated. The issue here was the poor reverse speed of the T-72, especially when compared to tanks like the Leopard 2. Additionally, the Russian armor was on the offensive, which put them at a disadvantage, as they encountered the Leopard in one of the scenarios it was specifically designed for, defense, and particularly the delay. So it's no surprise that a single well-positioned Leopard 2 was able not only to delay and disrupt the column but also to completely fend off the assault, resulting in significant vehicle losses for the Russians. A good example that when deployed under the right conditions, tanks are far from obsolete. However, for transparency, I must mention that Russia also released footage from the same area showing at least one Leopard 2 tank being struck by Lancet drones. The tank appeared to have already been abandoned, but it's unclear what caused this. It could have been an FPV drone, but we cannot say for certain. However, it seems the tank withstood the hit quite well. What do you think? This Russian soldier, who had taken shelter in a crater, can be considered extremely lucky, as an FPV drone landed directly on him but failed to explode. Realizing his luck, the soldier quickly left the crater to move out of the potential blast radius, as the drone could still detonate later. His fate afterward, however, remains unknown. This soldier threw a canister containing a missile from his pickup truck when the missile suddenly misfired and launched uncontrollably, nearly hitting him. It's unclear if this footage is recent, but it was definitely filmed in winter. According to the Wall Street Journal, a North Korean general was recently wounded in a Ukrainian strike in Kursk. Based on this, the Moscow Times reported a North Korean general was wounded in a Ukrainian missile strike on southwestern Russia's Kursk region, the Wall Street Journal reported Thursday, citing anonymous Western officials. Ukraine on Wednesday fired at least 10 UK-supplied Storm Shadow missiles at the Marino estate, a site located around 32 kilometers from the front lines in the Kursk region, Western and Ukrainian officials said. The estate reportedly housed a Russian army command post and a communications hub, with North Korean generals allegedly present during the attack, according to Ukrainian media. These news reports were published after Ukraine released this drone video, which is said to show the Storm Shadow strikes in Marino on November 20, 2024. A total of 9 impacts can be seen. Russia's military confirmed that British-supplied Storm Shadow missiles were used in the attack. Meanwhile, local territorial defense forces in the Kursk region reported that a total of 12 missiles targeted the Marino estate. The identity of the North Korean general was not disclosed. However, Ukrainian and South Korean officials previously stated that Pyongyang had sent Colonel General Kim Yong-bok to oversee North Korea's coordination with Russia. The attack comes after outgoing US President Joe Biden granted permission for Ukrainian strikes within Russia using American-supplied ATACMS missiles. In response to this development, Russia revised its nuclear doctrine, lowering the threshold for a nuclear strike in response to a broader range of conventional attacks. Alongside this, a nuclear-capable ballistic missile was launched toward the city of Dnipro, as seen in the footage here. There are conflicting reports on whether the missile was an ICBM or an IRBM. When questioned about the attack, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova was caught on a hot mic taking a phone call during which she was instructed not to comment on the ballistic missiles that struck Dnipro.
Да. Алло. Да, у меня брифинг.
Я боюсь маршал удар баллистическими ракетами, о чем Запад не стали говорить, не комментирую вообще.
Да, хорошо, спасибо. Biden's
decision to allow Ukrainian strikes into Russia stems from several reasons. First, it is a direct response to the deployment of North Korean troops to the conflict. Second, it significantly complicates any potential deal between Trump and Putin. Third, it provides much-needed relief to heavily pressured Ukrainian forces as Russia continues to make advances, particularly on the Eastern Front. Russian forces have also made advances in Kupiansk and Kursk. Ukraine's biggest challenge at the moment is a critical shortage of manpower, particularly in the east. Many units are under strength and unable to hold their positions against the advancing Russian forces. This has forced Ukrainian troops to abandon their positions, sometimes even without engaging in combat. This does not mean that Ukraine is not putting up any resistance in the east. In fact, while positions sometimes have to be given up without a fight, there are still numerous instances of heavy fighting, and Russia continues to take significant losses. The difference is that Russia can sustain these losses more effectively than Ukraine and has greater financial resources to make enlisting in its ranks appealing, despite all the Western sanctions. These graphs here even indicate that, for example, October 2024 was the most devastating month for the Russian armed forces since the start of the war. In terms of equipment alone, at least 489 vehicles were lost. In terms of manpower, it has been reported that Russia lost an average of 1,500 soldiers daily in October 2024. Western analysts estimate that the total number of Russian casualties has surpassed 700,000 so far. Additionally, many observers, such as German analyst Carlo Mazzola, now believe that Ukraine's casualty numbers are similarly high. If you've watched this far, I want to say thank you. If you enjoy my work and want to support me, please consider leaving a like and a comment. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. In today's attention economy, I need your support to avoid having my efforts buried under sensationalized fake news content farms that manipulate the system with bots. Thank you for your time and support. Here, this Russian MTLB reportedly crushed a car donated to Russian soldiers under its tracks as a punishment because the soldiers were allegedly using the vehicle to regularly leave the front line. This prompted the unit's commander to decide that it would be best to make an example by simply running over the car with the armored tractor. Of course, this story cannot be verified, but it does have a certain logic to it. By destroying the vehicle, the commander would be sending a clear message to the troops about the consequences of misusing resources meant for combat duties. Not to mention the unauthorized abandonment of the front line, although the situation here does sound a bit strange. Here we have Russian helmet cam footage from one of the many mechanized assaults on Ukrainian positions, a perspective we typically only see through observer drones. The soldiers disembark from their armored vehicle in front of a tree line and advance under fire. Many viewers and bots often comment that I only show Ukrainian footage without actually watching the entire video. Let me clarify this once and for all. As you can see, I also share Russian footage. However, the reality is that people rarely watch it. My statistics clearly show which parts of a video are viewed the most, and the sections featuring Russian footage consistently receive the least attention. So, these Russian trolls complain without even bothering to watch the video. In this helmet cam video, a Russian soldier on an ATV captured the moment a Russian MTLB was disabled, likely by an FPV drone. While a mine could also be a possibility, the vehicle's tracks appeared to be intact, which makes an FPV drone or another anti-tank weapon more likely in my opinion. The two crew members were unharmed. They disembarked from the still moving but disabled vehicle and jumped onto the back of the ATV, which quickly left the area. The urgency of the ATV driver also suggests the presence of drones actively targeting Russian troops in the area. MTLBs are only very lightly armored, and there have been many occasions where they continued moving even after being hit and disabled, like in this case, where an MTLB simply kept driving in circles. This Russian armored vehicle, equipped with makeshift turtle armor, had such limited visibility that it drove directly into a Ukrainian-constructed anti-tank ditch on the Pokrovsk front. With its belly now exposed, the crashed vehicle became a target for FPV drone practice by Ukrainian drone pilots, who successfully struck it several times. And since I only show Ukrainian footage, here we have a similar event, this time involving a Ukrainian Bradley stuck in a Russian anti-tank ditch. This is interesting footage of another Bradley after it was damaged in combat. Take a close look at its cannon. This group of Russian soldiers was observed by a Ukrainian drone as they stood next to a burning Ukrainian house, which they had reportedly set on fire. In retaliation, the Ukrainian forces targeted the group with an explosive drop from the drone. I cannot share this here, but the full video is available on my Telegram channel. You can find the link in the description. These Russians on an armored vehicle were targeted by a Ukrainian FPV drone, which they desperately tried to shoot down. In a last-ditch effort, a Russian soldier threw his rifle at the drone just seconds before it could impact. His bold move paid off, and the drone exploded without causing any damage. However, a second FPV drone was pursuing them, and this time it appears to have struck the vehicle, forcing the soldiers to abandon their transport and leap into the unknown. I think we're all familiar with the sight of a termite drone or dragon's breath drone raining fire down on a Russian-occupied tree line. However, this footage shows one devastating a bunker by bouncing around inside from left to right, turning the defensive structure into a fiery inferno reminiscent of the bunker scene from the opening of Saving Private Ryan. This Russian BMP drove directly over a mine east of Pogrebki in Russia's Kursk region. As a result of the detonation, the vehicle flipped over. This Russian FPV drone was pursuing a Ukrainian armored personnel carrier in Kursk. Its hunt for the armored personnel carrier was abruptly interrupted when a Russian Lancet drone unexpectedly crashed into the Ukrainian vehicle before the FPV drone could make its move. However, it seems the Ukrainian armor kept rolling after the hit. This Ukrainian tank was also targeted by a Russian Lancet drone while conducting a direct fire mission in the Donetsk region. However, the Lancet failed to penetrate the tank, which then had to turn around due to the poor reverse speed of T-series tanks. It seemed to be its lucky day, as it narrowly avoided an artillery shell that landed very close just afterwards. This is footage of a Ukrainian soldier shooting down a Russian cruise missile using a man-portable anti-air missile launcher. And here we see a female Ukrainian soldier shooting down another Russian cruise missile with an Igla launcher. The backstory of this soldier is quite interesting. Her name is Natalia, and before the war, she worked as a kindergarten teacher. This was her first combat launch and her first them with missile strikes. In these cases, the drones are used to oversaturate Ukrainian air defenses. To counter this, Ukraine employs a combination of anti-air missiles, systems like the Jeopard, and other anti-aircraft guns. The increasing intensity of these attacks was also reported to be one of the reasons behind the previously mentioned American authorization for long-range strikes into Russia. I forgot to mention this earlier, but remembered it again while watching these clips. Previously, Ukraine's only means of retaliation were domestically produced long-range drones and small propeller planes converted into drones for strikes inside Russia. Similar to Russia's slow long-range drones, the interception rate of these Ukrainian strike drones is high, as evidenced by the numerous videos that surface almost daily. However, from time to time, these drones do hit their targets, producing images like these, which are highly useful in the informational domain. Nevertheless, these strikes lack a saturating effect and, with a few notable exceptions, such as strikes on ammunition depots, are generally of low strategic value.
Oh no, no,